everything is natural. Hoping to rid us of the binary straitjacket that Western culture purports, Butler calls for resignification of historical conventions, a deconstructive overhaul. When we understand that speech is performative, and accordingly sex and gender too, we can reconceptualize identity as a trap, wrought with imitation games and surveilled by power structures innate to language, meaning, and history, where inevitable deviants are hounded into containment by gatekeepers of the law and social forces, whose legitimacy is revitalized through this conformity. When we understand that gender is a kind of persistent impersonation that passes as the real, we are left with facades, illusions of reality around every corner. This destabilization then begs the question, what political possibilities are the consequence of radical critique of these categorized identities? Overview. I will unpack Butler's deconstruction a little backwards, first by introducing the literature through which the tenets of Butler's theory are illuminated. Sandra Cisneros says The House on Mango Street details 12-year-old Esperanza's identity construction in relation to her race, sex, age, community values, and more. Following, I will pivot to Butler's understanding of gender as a performance and drag, and I'll critically read the vignette with this tenet in mind. Then I will discuss how Butler dissolves binaries that exist within the construction of coherence through Herculean and Kristeva. Then I will zoom in on the body and discuss how history and power work to inscribe it, create cultural values from it, and further suppress it. Finally, I will loop back to the subversion that drag as parody presents, and further illuminate Butler's desire for a pastiche or a post-gender world. The House on Mango Street. The House on Mango Street is by Sandra Cisneros, and it details Esperanza's coming of age as a 12-year-old Chicana girl growing up in Chicago. I will read the vignette, The Family of Little Feet, here. The Family of Little Feet. There was a family, all were little. Their arms were little, their hands were little, and their height was not tall, and their feet very small. The grandpa slept on the living room couch and snored through his teeth. His feet were fat and doughy, like thick tamales, and these he powdered and stuffed into white socks and brown leather shoes. The grandma's feet were lovely as pink pearls and dressed in velvety high heels that made her walk with a wobble, but she wore them anyway because they were pretty. The baby's feet had 10 tiny toes, pale and see-through, like a salamander's, and these he popped into his mouth whenever he was hungry. The mother's feet, plump and polite, descended like white pigeons from a sea of pillow, across the linoleum roses, down the wooden stairs, over the chalk hopscotch squares, 5, 6, 7, blue sky. Do you want this? And gave us a paper bag with one pair of lemon shoes, and one red, and one pair of dancing shoes. They used to be white, but were now pale blue. Here, and we said thank you, and waited until she went upstairs. Hooray! Today we are Cinderella because our feet fit exactly, and we laugh at Rachel's one foot with a girl's gray sock and a lady's high heel. Do you like these shoes? But the truth is, it is scary to look down at your foot that is no longer yours and see attached a long, long leg. Everybody wants to trade the lemon shoes for the red shoes and the red pair that were once white, and the red pair for the pair that were once white, but are now blue, pale blue, and the pale blue for the lemon, and take them off and put them back on and keep on like this a long time until we are tired. Then Lucy screams to take off her socks, and yes, it's true, we have legs, skinny and spotted with satin scars where scabs were picked, but legs, all our own, good to look at and long. It's Rachel who learns to walk the best, all strutted in those magic high heels. She teaches us to cross and uncross our legs, and to run like a double Dutch rope, and how to walk down to the corner so that the shoes talk back to you with every step. Lucy, Rachel, me, teeter-tottering like so. Down to the corner where the men can't take their eyes off us. We must be Christmas. Mr. Benny at the corner grocery puts down his important cigar. Your mother know you got shoes like that? Who give you those? Nobody. Them are dangerous, he says. You girls are too young to be wearing shoes like that. Take them shoes off before I call the cops. But we just ran. On the avenue, a boy in a homemade bicycle calls out, "Ladies, lead me to heaven." But there's nobody around but us. "Do you like these shoes?" Rachel says yes, and Lucy says yes, and yes, I say, "These are the best shoes. We will never go back to wearing the other kind again. Do you like these shoes?" In front of the laundromat, 6 girls with the same fat face pretend we are invisible. They are the cousins, Lucy says, and always jealous. We just keep strutting. Across the street, in front of a tavern, a bum man on the stoop. "Do you like these shoes?" The bum man says, "Yes, little girl. Your little lemon shoes are just so beautiful. But come closer, I can't see very well. Come closer, please." "You are a pretty girl," the bum man continues. "What's your name, pretty girl?" And Rachel says Rachel, just like that. Now, to talk to drunks is crazy and to tell them your name is worse, but who can blame her? She's young and dizzy to hear so many sweet things in one day, even if it is a bum man's whiskey words saying them. "Rachel, you're prettier than the yellow taxi cab. You know that?" "But we don't like it." "We gotta go," Lucy says. "If I give you $1, will you kiss me?" "How about $1? I give you $1. And he looks in his pocket for wrinkled money. "We have to go right now," Lucy says, taking Rachel's hand, because she looks like she's thinking about that $1. Bumman is yelling something to the air, but by now we are running fast and far away, our high heel shoes taking us all the way down the avenue and around the block, past the ugly cousins, past Mr. Benny's, up Mango Street the back way, just in case. We are tired of being beautiful. Lucy hides the lemon shoes and the red shoes and the shoes that used to be white, but are now pale blue, under a powerful bushel basket on the back porch, until one Tuesday her mother, who is very clean, throws them away. But no one complains. With this vignette in mind, I will now interpret it through the lens of gender as performance. What better way to understand the false stabilization of gender categories than through drag? Butler argues this is the most subversive way to problematize the idea that corporeal signification is reflective of our inner core. Drag undermines the distinction between inner and outer psychic space and mocks the emotion of true gender identity. This appearance is an illusion. This imitation is without origin. To quote from Butler, "In the place of the law of heterosexual coherence, we see sex and gender denaturalized by means of a performance which avows their distinctness and dramatizes the cultural mechanism of their fabricated unity." Page 2550 of the second edition. With this in mind, I will now re-examine the aforementioned vignette through the lens of gender as performance. In acquiring the shoes from the unnamed older woman, the girls immediately mimic that which the shoes seemingly presuppose for them. The performance begins with giddiness. They shout, "Hooray! Today we are Cinderella." They laugh at the juxtaposition of Rachel's sock with the lady's high heel, as they share an understanding of what the performance does and doesn't entail. After swapping around the shoes and choosing that which is constructed as fitting for each of them, Lucy and Esperanza take walking lessons from Rachel. They practice performing that which is expected of ladies, hoping to fulfill society's expectations for them as shoe wearers, or these ones in particular. Similar to riding a bike, at first this all seems unnatural, but then it is natural. We practice and master constructions to the point where they somehow, in some way, create us, or at least make us feel like they do. And this socially constructive rite of passage of learning how to walk in heels is familiar for most femmes. We practice this in many other performances, so the watchful eye of powerful social forces validates us. Don't slip. Walk heel-toe, not toe-heel. Lean slightly back, arch your foot, and pretend like there's a painted straight line ahead of you. We all imitate behavior prescribed to us through meanings within the respective cultural discourses. As my lecture continues, I will expose the conflicts that arise within the vignette as consequences of the patriarchy. The construct of coherence. Desperately aiming to resolve, categorize, conceptualize, and order, modern Western culture has effectively created a culture of coherence, one where corporeal signification is falsely understood as an inner core. This problematic system of structures conceals gender discontinuities, positing gender, sex, and desire as inextricably linked. But Butler argues that none reflect the other, and that we actually do have a fluidity of identities. Because interiority is the effect and function of decidedly public and social discourse, an illusion maintained for the regulation of sexuality, gender, is a construction that regularly conceals itself and conceals its genesis. Butler uses Herculean's story and Kristeva's logic to drive this point home. Herculine Barbine was a 19th century intersex person born in France. Originally assigned female at birth, Herculine was later reclassified as male by a court of law after an affair with another woman in a physical examination. Wrought with metaphysical homelessness and the inevitability of their insatiable desire, Herculine committed suicide, with rage for men and moreover the world. Butler believes that Foucault romanticized and appropriated Herculene's upbringing as, quote, happy limbo of non-identity, end quote. Moreover, Butler asserts that Herculene's account shows that sexuality is not outside the law, but rather it's an ambivalent production of the law. Herculine is outside the law, but the law maintains this outside within itself, so in effect, Herculine embodies the law. Quote, it is not as an entitled subject, but as an enacted testimony to the law's uncanny capacity to produce only those rebellions that it can guarantee will, out of fidelity, defeat themselves, and those subjects who, utterly subjected, have no choice but to reiterate the law of their genesis. That was on page 106 of Butler's Gender Trouble, not mentioned in the second edition. This ties to Butler's usage of Mary Douglas's understanding of the relationship by which social taboos institute and maintain boundaries of the body. That's on page 2544 of the second edition. Quote, if the body is synecdotal for the social system per se, or a site in which open systems converge, then any kind of unregulated permeability constitutes a site of pollution and endangerment. Page 2545 of the second edition. Butler deconstructs this idea of outside and other as paradoxically conceived within the same signifying economy as the inner. Further, she dismantles these boundaries through Kristeva's abject. Here we have the dichotomy between the self and the other, the inner and the outer, the subject and the object. Cast between them is a boundary tenuously maintained through cultural order and social regulations. The construction of the self, the not me, is contingent on the abjects, or that which has been expelled from the body and is literally rendered other. The abject establishes the boundaries of the body, whilst also creating the other. The seemingly impenetrable boundary, that which separates us from all that isn't so impermeable. After all, the inner effectively becomes the outer through this excretion. Therefore, the inner and the outer aren't utterly distinct. They can't be, unless the boundary is truly enclosed and the abject explodes the self through the filth it fears. Without this impenetrable boundary, the binary itself is dissolved. All binaries are dissolved. And without the clear and defined self, its fixity and the internal locale of gender identity are further brought into questioning. How does the body figure its surface, the very invisibility of hidden depth? It and all that which is involved are then constructed. I will post this image underneath my lecture so that you can zoom in and see all the little things that may not be visible at the moment. Without the binaries between appearance and reality, body and soul, difference and identity, and all else, we are left with the products, or all we are left with are the products of our discourse. We are the products of our discourse. Identity is constructed in the vignette through the shoes, and in particular the dancing shoes that used to be white but are now pale blue. This suggests the blurring of identity. The very shoe's identity is in flux, and the same can be said of all the characters. Our bodies are constructed around mundane performances like this. the grandpa in his fat leather shoes, the grandma in her velvety high heels. The baby will soon be prescribed in his shoes too. At this point, Esperanza, Lucy, and Rachel are constructing their identity through the shoes, seeing which fits and what doesn't. Another layer of their identity construction involves the watchful eye of powerful social forces. This is dramatized through the three characters: Mr. Benny, who threatens to call the cops if they don't remove their shoes, the cousins, who cast judgment on the girls, and the bum man, who is intoxicated off more than just the alcohol. Although the girls are not subverting the binaries, as they are wearing women's shoes whilst performing as female as well, they're engaging in a facet of their category beyond their years, which cultural values deem unfit. Each of the antagonists construct their own identity from their interactions with the girls as well. They perform the various reactions, quote, appropriate to the situation: disgust, resentment, infatuation. And while the girls, exhausted by the reaction to their performance, eject, quote, the shoes from their identity at the end of the vignette, but little do they know that the shoes aren't the only constructs to their identity. They have and will continue to perform more without even thinking it, and their counterparts likewise. The body. Now let's zoom in on the body and examine all that we take for granted in the presupposed binaries. We will further interrogate how interiority is actually gender performatives of an absent core. The body is an inscribed surface of events, the surface of the patriarchy. Preconceived binaries regarding the body's makeup as the separation of the body and the interior soul do not hold under Butler's logic here. Butler's deconstruction of the binaries leaves us with an interior soul without a body, or within the body, that is signified through inscriptions on the body. Thus, the soul itself is a construct, moreover, a tyrant. The soul isn't imprisoned by or within the body as Christianity would deem it. The soul is the prison of the body, and accordingly the body is a signifying lack with the interior soul, or a core that is a core as that which the body lacks. To quote Butler, the figure of the interior soul is understood as within the body is signified through its inscription on the body, even though its primary mode of signification is through its very absence, its potent invisibility. Page 2548 of the second edition. And genealogy attempts to expose the body, totally imprinted by history. And because history, a relentless writing instrument, is the creation of values and meanings by a signifying practice that requires the subjection of the body, wherein the meaning host powers that pervasively function through them. This process, the result of an inscription on the body, creates cultural values. Butler challenges the signifying practice innate to history. We must resignify these historical conventions so as to free the body from this siege. Cultural values and the body. The inscriptions on the body here pivot on the shoes as choices that become seemingly natural and tied to the body. The grandpa's feet seem to mold perfectly within and function well through the leather shoes. And likewise, the grandma's shoes, though not entirely functional and comfortable, craft themselves to the softness or create the softness and loveliness that are her pink feet. Each of the family members' shoes have constructed the feet that inhabit them, yielding some to believe that such assignments were actually natural. This is undermined by the girls' repeated practice of wearing high heels. The baby, with pale and see-through toes like salamanders, is free from the inscriptions, though he will probably be squeezed into some sort of shoe that becomes inscribed on his body and that he renders natural eventually. And while there is an absent core, the antagonists of the vignette presuppose that the shoes relay corporeal signification innate to the girls' inner soul, though such a space is actually an abyss. So while the girls giddily partake in the performance, onlookers problematize the relationship between the performance and the girls' apparent core. Everyone has a reaction. Because the body is the surface of the patriarchy, the girls aren't even allowed to enjoy their excursion. and out of fear and exhaustion, they save the shoes for a rainy day. There will come a time when society will deem it appropriate for them to wear high heels, but other consequences will yield from that. But for the time being, it is clear that the antagonists of the vignette are uncomfortable or lean into the idea that shoes on these shoe wearers is incompatible with the cultural value ascribed to them. Subversion. And what do we make of all this? Will the show go on with the celebration of roses and the disdain of tomatoes? Or will there come a time when we get off the stage because the stage itself is obsolete? Butler imagines a post-gender world, one where the parody becomes pastiche, or the subversive no longer has a normal to subvert, and the imitation has no longer an ulterior motive. The loss of this normal, or the unmasking of the normal as a failed copy, will be the occasion for laughter. So for now, we can keep parodying the, quote, inherent link between anatomical sex, gender identity, and gender performance. After all, there is no, quote, gender-free world, considering the body has already been inscribed to it and of it. There's only post-gender, which we will be working towards. So we should be working towards, so appearances would be acknowledged as illusionary, identity politics as unnecessary, and gender as radically incredible. Like our protagonists, we too must be tired of the reactions to our constructions, of the labor involved in rationalizing our performances to ourselves and others, of the patriarchal inscriptions to our bodies, and of our reckoning with them. For now, let's rest knowing that there are no true genders, no apparent realities, no original or derived essences, no inner truths that we have to mine for. In a society that benefits from your self-doubt, liking yourself is a rebellious act, and giving ourselves and those around us the grace and love they deserve to grow into their own is the least we can do. Let's not scrutinize each other for the ways we seemingly subvert constructions and instead work to liberate ourselves from the construction of coherence, one shoe at a time.